Hello everyone, we want to start looking at Matlab, and this is a typical Matlab window. Yours might look a little different, depends on the version you have. If you look in the upper left hand corner, you'll see I have Matlab 2013, so it's a somewhat older version of Matlab, but it does everything we need it to do. You have the top line menu up here. There's a couple of different areas that we'll look at, especially when it comes to new script and new and open. Speaking of open, there's a file directory here on the command line, or what looks like the command line in Excel, and that's just telling us where our files are located, and we can change that as we need to, but this is where I house them on my computer. So we'll keep those there, and you can see some files underneath the current folder. Then in the middle of the window, or the middle of the screen, we have the command window, and that's usually got a double greater than sign in it. And this is where you can enter commands. So if I wanted to do 2 plus 2, I could enter that into here, and then it tells me that the answer is 4. Then you'll notice in the upper right-hand area, you'll see the workspace, and now there's a variable here called ANS. That's the default variable for answer, and it's got a value of 4. This 2x2 grid that you see here is an indicator that MATLAB works with matrices. That's our default, is to work with matrices. And if we go down here, you'll see the command history, and it tells you that on November 6th of 2022, I entered the command 2 plus 2. All right, so there's a little brief intro to the window for MATLAB. So you see me use this as a fancy calculator. That's not very exciting, but there are some other things that are worth mentioning in here. I can assign variables, so I could say Bob equals 27. And then you'll see in the workspace area a new variable called Bob with the value of 27 is entered up there. I can do arithmetic with Bob. I can say Bob times 2. And not surprising, I get 54 for my answer. And then, of course, it says ANS is 54. If I double click on Bob, it brings up a little spreadsheet looking thing. This is just a matrix. And I could change Bob to 1, 2, 3, and 4, so I could make it a matrix. I'll just close that, and now you can see that it's a matrix, and the values within are 1, 2, 3, and 4. Notice how it enters the matrix in square brackets, and then puts a semicolon between the first row and the second row, and a comma between each element within that row. Right, so now if I take Bob times 2, I'll get a slightly different response. I'm going to get 2468. You can see that down here, and it displays it as a matrix. But then up here, ANS, which is the result or answer to my query, is going to be 2468 over here. The other thing we would like to do in here is we like to put in comments. Comments are started with a % sign. You can see that's in green, and then I can just write this is a comment, and nothing happens. It's just a comment. It's not anything I can work with a calculator, any multiplication or division, nothing along those lines can happen with a comment. But comments are very important to document what's going on in your workspace. All right, so let's type edit. And you'll see when I type edit, I get this new window. This is the editor window. And this is a pretty important window for us because it's going to be where we want to do a lot of our work. And the reason for that, let me close this for a second. The reason for that is if I hit something like Fred equals 7, and I really meant Betty equals 7, well, there's no way for me to go back up here into Fred. I have to retype the entire thing and say that Betty is equal to 7. And of course, that doesn't eliminate Fred. That just gives me a new variable called Betty with the value of 7. So there's no way for me to edit. The closest thing I can do is hit the up arrow, and you can see Betty equals 7. And now I can edit this as a new line, though. And maybe that's supposed to be Betsy equals 7. One other thing that we'll do on occasion is put a semicolon after the command. And what you'll notice is that there's nothing below here. Like when I said Betty equals 7, it repeated my command. When I put the semicolon at the end, it doesn't repeat what I typed. but Betsy does in fact exist and has a value of 7. All right, so I can't do any editing in the command window. In fact, I really don't like using the command window any more than I have to. And that's where we go to the editor window, right? And I'm going to create a file in here. Oh, let me go back to the command window and let me do a clear. If I type clear, what you'll notice is the workspace is now empty. Those variables are gone. So if I type Betty and hit enter, it's case sensitive, so I got to be careful with that. That's an undefined username, even though I defined it up here, right? So if I said Betty equals 3, you can see it up here in the window. And then if I just type Betty down here, it tells me Betty is equal to 3. When I type clear, I eliminate all the variables. They're gone. All the variables are gone. The other thing I like to type is CLC, and that's going to clear my command window, right? Command window. So clear the command window, and now there's nothing up there. Now the history is all still there, but the command window is blank. All right, the reason I bring that up is whenever I do an edit, I generally like to do clear and CLC. And that way, when I work with this window, other windows that I may have been working with are going to be eliminated. So if I want to use a variable name that I've already used, I don't have to worry about it being defined by another program or edited area. And so now I'm ready to do something like I can type Wilma is equal to 3, and I'll put a semicolon after that, and Fred is equal to 15. And then I'll make a comment, %. I like the Flintstones. Okay, and now I'm going to save this file. So I go to save right here. And by default, it's going to save it in the Matlab directory of documents. This is the default directory, so that's where it's going to put it. And so we'll call this practice A. And I'll hit save. And these are oftentimes called M files because you'll see that this has a file name of practice A.M. So do a lot of these over here. In fact, it looks like all of them do. So we often refer to these files as M files. All right, we can close that now. And what I'm going to do in the command line is I'm going to say practice A. And what this does is it executes all of the commands. Now remember that clear and CLC were the first. Here's Fred and Wilma. Fred is 15, Wilma is 3. And there's nothing over here because I did a CLC. I cleared the command window. But now I could do something like Fred divided by Wilma, and I get 5. And the answer there is 5. Okay? And that tells me the answer to the query that I did, but it uses the variables that I defined when I executed practice A. And if I execute practice A again, you'll notice the command line or the command window is cleared. If I do practice little a, nothing happens. Remember, it's got to be case sensitive. All right, so you've got to use the same thing. It even thinks, hey, did I mean practice A? And fills that in for me. And so I'm ready to execute that again. If I go over here to practice A under the current folder and I double click on it, it's going to open up that window and bring out that file again. And I can start editing again if I so desire. Again, this M file, this editing window is going to be your best friend. We're going to do very little in the command window. Most of it that we do is going to be in the editor, so that if I make a mistake or need to alter something, it's an easy thing to do. If I'm in the command window, not so much. So I'm going to want to do a lot of this in the editor. I'd say 90% or more of our work will be in the editor. Another way I can open up a new editor window besides typing edit is I can go to new script, and there gives me another one. Notice the tabs at the top, a little bit like Excel has tabs at the bottom. So if I want to do something from practice A, so I might do something like this. I'm going to do a copy, but I don't want to change practice A. and then I'll do a paste, right? And I'm going to change Wilma, and I'm going to make Wilma a matrix. Remember, those had square brackets, and I'm going to say 1, 2, 3, 4. And then I'm going to change Fred, and I'm going to make Fred 1, 4, 9, and 16, which you can pretty much see as the square of Wilma. And then I'm going to type in a new command. I'm going to say plot Wilma Fred. And you could see that help window that popped up. It's not popping up anymore. So I'm going to hit enter here, and I'm going to save this file. Oh, I'm going to save it. Oh, I haven't given it a name yet, so I'm going to save it as practice B. And then what I want to do is execute practice B. So I'll go up here, I'll type in practice B, and hit enter. And you can see this new plot window pops out here, and all of the values that I put in can be seen in this plot window. Now it looks more like a dot to dot than it does a nice parabola, but that's because there's only 4 points. There's one at 1, 1, another one at 2, 4, 3, 9, and 4, 16. So because there's only those 4 points, what Matlab does is a dot to dot, and so you'll see straight lines between those dots. Now if I had many, many, many more points, then you would see a smooth curve. So there's a brief overview on Matlab. We'll get into more detail here shortly, but if you have any questions so far, please leave them in the comments below. Thank you.